Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I'm so honored to be amongst you all, and I really thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk about Imam Galembevi rahimahullah. It's been a great, beneficial, fantastic day. I know it's long, inshallah it won't be too long more until we finish. But I'm really disappointed that I couldn't be there in person. It was my hope, but another time, inshallah. So as my title suggests, I want to look at the Risala fi Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara of Imam Galembevi rahimahullah. And just to go through the overview, I'll try and give some context. I'll probably talk very quickly about the author, then some context, a definition, a description, a dialectical modeling, something which I've called relevance dialectics or relevance argumentation, and I don't know how the experts in the field feel about it, and after my presentation, I'm very open to ideas, suggestions. I've got lots of tentative ideas and connections whirling around in my head, and so it'll be great to get the experts' view on some of this stuff. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the life of Imam Galembevi rahimahullah, but we know he was from a scholarly family, a legal family trained in Islamic law. We know he was one of the renowned intellectuals of what they call the late imperial period or the late Ottoman period. Historians can tell us better how to splice up the history of the Uthmaniyya Khilafah, but I'm just mentioning some periodizations given by some historians. Imam Galembevi had a specialization in mathematics, engineering, theology, philosophy. So, really a polymath in the truest sense. He was one of the scholars, despite sort of the end of his life, really being in relative poverty, he did receive a lot of official patronage and support in some of the work that he did. He was a prolific author, and his works on logic, mantiq, and argumentation, which I'll be talking about today, were notable works in his large corpus. So the text that I want to look at and what I'm translating at the moment, I should have had it done, all of it, but I haven't finished it. I've had some commitments and things like that, but inshallah I hope to finish it soon. And that is the Risala fi Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara. And although it's a short text with lots of commentaries, it was very innovative and highly beneficial. Okay, so let me just try and give a standard account of the genre of Adab al-Bahth leading up to Imam Galembevi. Of course, Professor Ruwayhab earlier gave us or mapped the terrain for us, from west to east. And so, I cannot rehearse his expertise here. But normally the turning point or the important pivot point for the development of Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara is attributed to Imam al-Samarqandi. And I've called it Imam al-Samarqandi's fork because when it comes to him, Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara becomes a sui generis discipline, i.e. it becomes a discipline that breaks away from ilm al-jadal. So we have Professor Young in the audience there. I mean, he is the mujtahid in that field. So, he is the expert. But the classical jadal, because of the way it was perceived, it being triumph-driven, i.e., the legal scholars, when they were debating, their dialectics was more driven towards how to defeat an opponent rather than it being truth-seeking. So with the account goes that Imam al-Samarqandi's Risala fi Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara is a break from the jadal. He moves away from jadal and he proposes Adab al-Bahth as its replacement, you could say. So he makes Bahth al-Munazara topic neutral, so it's across disciplines. It's not just for usul and fiqh and kalam, but it's across any discipline. You should be able to apply the theory of al-bahth wal-munazara to any discipline. So those are some of the sort of innovative posturing that we find. Then you've got this kind of middle, sort of what they call, we don't call it, but the average middle. So you have some treatises written by Imam al-Iji, Jurjani, and Tashkupuzadeh, and their texts on Adab al-Bahth wal-Munazara, though they have their peculiarities, they may be, focus on ethics or the protocols of debate, they didn't add very much substance to what was to Samarkandi and works of their predecessors. So people sort of skip that and say it's not really an original period of writing production. Then they come to Imam Sachakhli-Zadeh, rahimahullah, and I've called that here his entree of logic. So here, one of the innovations that he brings to the ilm al-munazara, or adab al-bahth al-munazara, is that he heavily appropriates or uses the definitions you find in Mantık, so the definitions used in that discipline, to frame debate. And he appropriates as well at-tasawwur wa tasdiq, these two categories from the logicians. So we see he's bringing in a kind of heavy logic into munazara. And Imam Galambevi, our author, is influenced by Sachakhli-Zadeh, and again he follows Samarkandi in accepting that ilm al-munazara is topic neutral. He accepts Sachakhli-Zadeh's idea that definitions is very, very important, and he frames it in the same way that he does as well. But what he also does, and I'll touch on this later, is he makes munazara, the only term I can think of is, relevant dialectics. So it's to do with tawjih now. So it becomes muwajjaha maqbula and muwajjaha ghayr maqbula. So I'll touch on a bit of that later on. What is ilm al-munazara for Imam Galambevi? Again, like his immediate predecessors, he tells us that فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْبَحْثُ الْمُنَاظَرَةِ مُدَافَعَ الْكَلَامِ لِيَظْهَرَ الْحَقِّ. So for him, it is this science, this discipline of argumentation and disputation. It consists of defending a claim in order to manifest the truth. So munazara has two components. There is a dialogue or a dialectic, two discussants together, and it's truth-oriented. Whereas the ilm al-jadal, ilm al-khilaf, the predecessor disciplines, they were argued to be triumph-seeking, i.e. it's about winning and defeating your opponent, not finding the truth. Now, it is quite arguable whether munazara is also triumph-seeking or not, and there's examples that people bring where it shows that you can defeat your opponent if they're obstinate. It's not about truth, but it's about crushing the dalil. But anyway, the claim is that this new universal topic-neutral discipline of ilm al-munazara is truth-seeking. The aim is for the discussants to arrive at the truth, and so everything must be geared towards them attaining the truth. So we now sort of talk about, I want to very briefly talk about the description of this discipline of adab al-bahth wal-munazara. So Imam Galambevi tells us that the science of this ilm al-adab of bahth al-munazara is a subject matter that consists of tamyiz al-sahih al-bahth an saqimi. So it's, again, this is not novel. This bit isn't novel. This discipline is for distinguishing between sound argumentation and unsound argumentation. فهو علم يبحث فيه عن أحوال الأبحاث الكلية من حيث أنها موجهة مقبولة وغير موجهة مقبولة. So this is the important bit here, where this knowledge, this ilm, is an investigation into the universal conditions of, or the general conditions of, argumentation in terms of whether it involves a correct dialectical exchange, whether muwajjaha maqbula is, whether muwajjaha, that's the correct translation. Of course, we can revise that, probably isn't. But the ma'na of it, as I see it, is this is a dialectical exchange, whether it's a correct one or an incorrect one. I.e. muwajjaha tawjih is when you direct your kalam. I'll give the definition next, but it's when you direct your kalam towards your opponent and vice versa. So there is this reciprocal exchange of each other's words and speech. So the whole science is to do with trying to identify or investigate the conditions surrounding this dialectical exchange and whether the dialectical exchange is correct or not. Are we arguing properly? Are we directing our words towards our opponents, and are they directing their words towards us as protagonists in a debate? Are we doing it properly? And so then he says that this ilm is an investigation into the general things, and the ghaya, the outcome or the aims or the what we should try and reach, or what this science should encroach upon, العصمة عن الخطأ في الأبحاث الجزئية. The particulars then of this argumentation, how do we protect ourselves from making errors in the particulars? So what we can see from the Al-Bahth wal-Munazara of Imam Galembavi, we can at least see four things in his theory. It's criterial, i.e. there's a satisfaction standard. You can't do it anyhow you want. You have to satisfy a certain way or mi'yar for your argumentation to be valid. So it's criterial. As we mentioned before about Samarkandi and Sarchaqlizadeh, that Al-Bahth wal-Munazara, Ilm al-Munazara is universal, it's topic neutral. Taqreer and Tahreer, these should be able to be applied to any discipline. And of course, one of the machines that enables that is logic. And the assumption here is that logic is also topic neutral, because logic is about, what follows from what. So the third point is here, relevance dialectics. Your kalam is properly directed at your opponent. And lastly, the Bahth al-Munazara is remedial. It must correct. It must be a way to correct your faulty argumentation. So it must track where you are making things wrong, and there must be a way in which it corrects your argumentation. Okay, so what I try to do in my paper, I suppose, is try and give some kind of models of whether, and I experiment with a few, maybe none of them work properly, but I've just put one here for the sake of about how to frame this argumentation. And one way we could use, one model we could use is very well known, is the pragma-dialectical model, and that says that there are 4 stages within a debate or an argumentation setup. There is the confrontation stage. So there must be a recognized difference of opinion between 2 opposing parties in order for a debate or a discussion to take off. If there's nothing to debate about or argue about, then relax. There's no reason to get heated. There's no reason to have a debate if there is nothing to debate in the first place. The second stage is the opening stage, where the parties, the debating parties, the proponent and the opponent, they decide on the material and procedural matters. So this is where they lay down their common beliefs and facts and mutually agreed axioms that they're going to follow in the debate, their protocols and so on. And then in stage 3, the argumentation stage, this is where there's a critical exchange of ideas. And the aim here in the argument stage is to try and resolve the initial dispute from the first stage, from the confrontation stage. And this is where logic, common sense perhaps, or whatever agreed principles are now applied to try and find a resolution. And then finally, the conclusion stage is determining whether the difference of opinion that was delineated at the beginning in the confrontation stage, whether there is a resolution for it. So if there is a resolution, and the debating parties come to an agreement, then there's the termination of the debate. If the conditions are met, then the debate closes. So perhaps this could be a framework with which we can use to frame Imam Kalembevi's theory. Again, not a nice fit. It doesn't fit precisely because Kalembevi takes on some of the structure from Samarkandi and particularly from Sir Chikhlizade's work. So it's not a clean fit, but if we were to try and fit it, we could say that the pragma-dialectical model for Kalembevi's argumentation theory could be, one, the confrontation stage could be where the mudda'i puts down the da'wah, and the mudda'i or the mu'allil, whichever term you want to use, the proponent states their ta'rif, their definition, or their taqsim, their categorization, or whatever it might be, their tasdiq, their assertion. And then when there's something agreed, because Imam Kalembevi rahimahullah is very clear to say if there's nothing to disagree about, then there should be no debate. So you can't disagree on a sound definition of something. There must be something that is disputable in the first place. So that's the confrontation stage. The opening stage could be where the participants, now lay down their qawa'id and the musallamat, and they agree on what's admissible, what's not admissible, and then based on that agreement, they then proceed to the argumentation stage, where now you use mantiq, and now you make your debate maneuvers and posturing like mani', naqd, munaqada, mu'arada, and all the other particulars related to these posturings. And then the final stage is where we have al-ajaz, which then resolves into two outcomes, either ifham, where the proponent has nothing to say, or ilzam, where the opponent is forced to concede a view, and we could call that the concluding stage. That was just a theoretical model that we could apply to the Adab al-Bahth al-Munazara framework of Imam Kalembevi. But much of the action that happens is in argumentation stage 3 anyway. Okay, although the confrontation stage, the stage where the actual da'wah, the claim, is being made, so a definition must be given. This is where some things can get exciting as well. Okay, so going on to my last point, I know we're running out of time. So what is unique then? What is different about Imam Kalembevi's Adab al-Bahth al-Munazara? So I think it's this idea of tawjih, definitely, where munazara becomes a directed, regulated, coordinated dialectic between two protagonists. And it must be regulated, because if it's not regulated, we cannot get the outcome of the munazara, which is the truth. And so this idea of tawjih, if we take one of the commentators on Imam Kalembevi's Risala, Kamal Pasha Zadeh, he says, what is tawjih? He tells us that tawjih is جعل المناظر كلامه مقابلا لكلام خصمه ودفاعا له. Debaters direct their words and defend it against the words of their opponent. So there is a calculated direction of attack towards the opponent and between the opponent and the proponent, but it must be calculated and directed and coordinated. And this is where it becomes muwajjaha maqbula. And under muwajjaha maqbula, we get things like having dalil, and then how the dalil divides up into different components, and what is proper, which premise you can attack in the argument, and so on and so forth. So it's an orchestrated, regulated dialectic that has to be relevant. Your kalam has to be directed to your opponent's claims or premises in a relevant way. In a relevant way, it must not be tangential, and it must be very particular to the issue that you want to address. So if the proponent gives a ta'rif, a definition, and then someone wants to raise a point about the definition, the point must be relevant to the definition. And then, of course, definition, Imam Kalembevi tells us, is governed by certain rules and axioms. So I guess one of the key features of this Adab al-Bahth al-Munazara is that it uses relevance what I've called relevance dialectics or relevance argumentation. I guess another feature you could add here is whether how much of ilm al-wad' is used, how much then of the 13th century linguistic turn or 14th century linguistic turn affects the Munazara in Galimbevi's text. And it's there definitely because it influenced Sir Chakalizada without a doubt. And so he's borrowing Sir Chakalizada as one of his major sources. So it definitely is a transferal of ilm al-wad' within there, because the focus is now on language terms, definitions, alfaz, and then ma'ani. And so, that definitely, that influence is there. Just finally, just to finish, I haven't begun doing it properly, but I've started to try and formalize thinking what argumentative model to use, and I've started to try and frame argument instances using some contemporary argument frameworks. Of course, we could use Dung's AF model, and others can be used. But one of the difficulties, of course, is if we're going to try and do it with just the text of Adab al-Bahth al-Munazara Imam Galimbevi, we don't have the masail as we find in the legal jadal manuals. We don't have enough cases on which then to construct an argumentative framework, because Imam Galimbevi doesn't give us a rich tapestry of cases, because it's not like ilm al-jadal that we find amongst the fuqaha and the usuliyun. So using sort of certain frameworks and models has been difficult, but I'm using the argumentative framework in another essay anyway, and that's a separate area of study. So just to conclude, Imam Galimbevi's text Risala fi Adab al-Bahth al-Munazara is on the theoretical genre of argumentation theory. The Risala is a post-classical text on argumentation theory that marks a shift away from the goal of triumph-seeking found in dialectics and disagreement literature to truth-seeking. The Risala is clearly situated in a context when ilm al-wad' had entered Islamic discourse, and thus it relies heavily on logically framed definitions and specific meanings of terms used and understood within the domain of users. The Risala is presented in a relevance dialectics, what I've called a relevance dialectics or relevance argumentation framework, where debate protagonists must direct their responses to the relevant aspects of the claims and arguments, and so on. So I'll end it there, and I thank you so much for your attention and this wonderful first day of the symposium.
Thank you very much, sir.